Video 2 for week 5 will be the triads and the Tong. Probably be a shorter video. The triad and the Tong, much like Yakuza, triad and Tong are generic terms, but not necessarily generic terms for organized crime, or generic terms for Chinese organized crime, but a generic term for Chinese benevolent social associations or groups, and some of them really are benevolent or social groups. There's a triad for cobblers. There's a triad for seamstresses. There's a triad for dock workers, and then some of the triads are criminal. Triads are based out of Hong Kong. There are 57 triad societies, give or take, operating out of Hong Kong. About 30 of them are criminal. And they have a great deal of range in size. Some are as small as 20 to 50 members. Some are as large as 30,000. And in addition to Hong Kong, they also operate out of Macau or Taiwan. And now this is not necessarily the gospel truth when it comes to origin stories for the triads, but I particularly like this story. The triads, of course, originally come from mainland China. And one of the best stories about possible origin of the triads is that they are descendants of 17th century fighting Shaolin. And the way the story goes, and this, for any of you who are fans of the old David Carradine show Kung Fu, a lot of this will sound really familiar to you. I'm not making this up. I actually got it from a legitimate source, though, I promise. The story is that the emperor, that a Chinese emperor, was having trouble fighting off a rebellion, and so he trained this group of Shaolin monks in the ways of Kung Fu. They became very proficient, and then he got these monks to help him win the rebellion, and he did. And the problem was that once he squashed this rebellion, these Shaolin were considered to be a danger, and so he decided to kill them. And so he sent the army to their temple, and had worked his way in so that one of the Shaolin, in fact, the number 7 man, in the hierarchy, which is why the number 7. And while you'll learn a little bit and you read that the triads are very much into numerology, you'll notice they never use the number 7 for anything. And this is the proposed reason why, because it was the number 7 man of the temple that betrayed the rest of the Shaolin, let the Chinese army in. All but 18 of the monks were killed in the initial onslaught. Those 18 fled into the countryside. Most of them were caught. And in the end, there were only 5 survivors. One of the Shaolin monk. Those five monks split up, and each one of them formed their own secret society, formed their own triad, with the goal of the destruction of the Qing dynasty. Eventually, they evolved into criminal groups, and they are decidedly anti-communist, which is one of the reasons why they now operate out of Hong Kong and not China. The Tong, on the other hand, are American organized crime groups composed entirely of Chinese Americans or Chinese nationals. They came into existence. The Chinese Tongs in America came into existence around the 1850s. Those of you that have taken Drugs and Drug Policy from Dr. Benefield, or have heard me lecture about drugs, U.S. drug policy, should have just had a light bulb go off in their head when I said 1850, and will probably be not surprised to hear me say that the city of origin for Chinese Tongs in the United States is San Francisco. Keep in mind, for those of you that aren't familiar, haven't taken Drugs and Drug Policy, or have heard me lecture about U.S. drug policy, it is in San Francisco in the 1850s when the very first drug policy was developed, and the very first drug policy passed through the city of San Francisco was targeted specifically at Chinese immigrants that had been brought in to work on the railroad. Much like triads, most Tong are respectable fraternal organizations, social benevolent societies, and they are not criminal. Though there are some Tong that are. They're referred to as fighting Tong. And the ones that are criminal are heavily involved in gambling, prostitution, narcotics dealing, that sort of thing, and do have links to the triads in Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. In fact, there was a certain point not too many years ago when a major triad leader from Hong Kong actually came to San Francisco and worked very heavily at attempting to organize and consolidate power of all the fighting Tong into one organization, and was largely successful, at least until he was killed. Both Triad and Tong are active in the United States, and mostly they prey on individuals in the Chinese community. In other words, they keep it to themselves, not necessarily, not always, but they do tend to keep it within Chinatowns. They tend to make alliances with both the Yakuza and La Cosa Nostra, but those relationships are very fluid. They change from time to time. They are, unlike the Yakuza, they are difficult for law enforcement to infiltrate for a number of reasons. One, they're very fluid. Their rank structure is very dynamic in nature. It changes quite often. Plus, the Chinese culture itself emphasizes intergenerational family, binds people together through mutual obligation, much like the Sicilian Mafia, and so encourages the sharing of resources through family, and it makes, when you have a tight-knit family group that forms the nucleus of these Tong and triad groups, makes it very hard to get undercover officers in. Much like it was very hard to get undercover officers into La Cosa Nostra for a very long time. The fact that they are not a single unified organized crime group makes it difficult for law enforcement as well. Other things that might make it difficult for the Tong to be infiltrated by law enforcement, the fact they are much more subtle than the Italians or the Russians. And while they can be extremely violent, they're a little choosier at times about when to use violence. To become a member of the Triad, you much like trying to join an OMG, in other words, outlaw motorcycle gang, you need a sponsor within a Triad of sufficient rank. So you just not just anyone in a Triad, but you need someone of some fairly decent rank to speak to vouch for you. And then you take, there's an initiation ritual that you go through. One of the ones that I read describes where they draw blood from the recruit, and then everybody drinks from it, kind of symbolizing that they're now all one family. But there's lots of variation in that ritual, and certainly a lot of these complex rituals have become very simplified lately. As much like other organized crime groups, the old traditions and rituals are slowly dying away. When it comes to structure of the triads, of course, the headquarters of all the criminal triads are located in Taiwan, with the rare exception of groups that are headquartered in Macau or Taiwan, but mostly they're out of Hong Kong. They're heavily into numerology, and so all of their positions come with a number. Though some of their positions come with the same number. I don't understand why. I'm just telling you what I know. The leader of a triad group, whose number is 489. This is the Shanchu, SHANC space CHU, so 2 words. In English, this is Dragon Head, or something along those lines. Dragon Head's a good word. Directly under him would be a deputy or a counselor, someone who fills a consingularity type role. Only unlike a consingularity isn't directly in the hierarchy, almost like an underboss. With the number 438, we talk about Fu Shan Ju, 3 words: Fu, second word Shan, S-H-A-N, and Chu, C-H-U. The Fu Shan Ju, again, a consingularity type individual, an advisor, a counselor, often an attorney. Off to the side from the Fu Shan Ju is number 415, the Pak Su Sin, the white paper fan, P-A-K, first word, second word, T-S-Z, and then third word, S-I-N, Pak Su Sin. This is your treasurer. He handles all your financial matters, and he is like a consingularity. He's not really in the whole vertical hierarchy, but he's the guy off to the side. He's only reporting to the Fu Shan Ju or the deputy. Under the deputy, this Fu Shan Ju, he controls several different groups. These include, and several of these follow the number 5438. These include the Huan Chu, H-E-U-N-G, and then Chu. This is your incense master. And your incense master, the Huan Chu, I guess that's Huan Chu. Should probably get my Google Translate out and ask them to pronounce some of these words for me. The Huan Chu, the incense master, he's responsible for arranging for all the rituals and oaths that are involved in an organization. There's also number 426, the Red Ruler, or the Hung Quan. First word H-U-N, second word K-W-A-N, Hung Quan. This is your military commander. He handles all your conflicts with other triad organizations, other triads. There is also, following the number 438, is your Sing Feng, your vanguard for a translation. He's responsible for establishing subgroups of the triads, and this individual will be the one responsible for supervising and controlling the soldiers, or the Tsukao. And then the 432, the last guy in this kind of rank of the hierarchy, is your Glass Slipper. I do not have a Chinese name for that. He's just called the Glass Slipper. And the Glass Slipper is the individual responsible for communication. He's like your comm officer. And then they have various individuals that don't have numbers attached to them. They have specializations. Of course, they report to different people in the hierarchy, but they do have specific people that handle accounting, recruiting. They have an operations group that handles the drugs and the prostitution, and then they have a specific group that handles training and welfare, and especially they train new members, and they do train new members, and they take care of widows of killed triad members, and those families of individuals that have gone to prison. The Tong, on the other hand, their hierarchy is more difficult to track down. In fact, in my residential class, over a weekend, I challenged a class to go online and find a hierarchical structure for the Tong, and none of them could come up with anything. In fact, the closest they could come up to was something similar to what the triads do use, and that's not particularly accurate. They are formed a lot like political action committees, where you have people who represent interests in the community. And that's, again, it's based on kind of a family relationship, but difficult to describe that other than say they're organized like a political action committee or PAC. Of course, they have their own code of ethics. My poor residential class, I actually kind of forgot to tell them about the code of ethics of the triad, but I'll give them to you out of one of my sources. Their code of ethics. This is just a sample of triad Tong ethics, but you'll like these. They're 10. I guess maybe it's their 10 commandments or something. But this is a code of ethics for a triad. For the triad, culture involves. Let's see. I'll just read these to you. Harmony with the people is the first priority. We have to establish good social and personal connections so as not to create enemies. Number 2, we have to seek special favors and help from uncommitted gang members by emphasizing our relationship with outside people. Let them publicize us. Number 3, gambling is our main financial source. We must be careful how we handle it. Number 4, do not take it upon yourself to start things and make decisions you are not authorized to make. You are to discuss and plan all matters with the group and the elder brother first. Number 5, everyone has their assigned responsibility. Do not create confusion. Number 6, we must not divulge our plans and affairs to outsiders, for example, to our wives and girlfriends. This is for our own safety. Number 7, we have to be unified with all our brothers and obey our elder brother's orders. Number 8, all money earned outside the group must be turned over to the group. You must not keep any of it for yourself. Let the elder brother decide. That by elder brother is a Tong term. In fact, in Chinese, it is elder brother, or big brother would be the Dailo, D-A-I, new word L-O. And then you would have, if you're the Dailo, you're the little guy, the little soldier guy. Dailo is big brother. That's your elder brother. So you are the Yilo. You might be a Yilo, a leader of a small group. You might be a Majai, a little brother. You would report to the Dailo, the big brother. This would be your elder brother. You're always going to report to your elder brother. The Dailo's elder brother would be the Dailo, or the big brother. And then he would report, the Dailo then works up to the Akong, which is the association itself. So anyway, that's why I keep reading this elder brother. That's kind of give you an idea, a little bit of idea of the hierarchy. In other words, the guy ahead of you in hierarchy, he's your elder brother, or your Dailo. And then his boss is the Dailo, the big brother. It's all nice family. So where are they? Number 9. When targeting wealthy prospects, do not act hastily. Furthermore, do not harass or threaten them. Act to prevent suspicion and fear upon their part. And then finally, number 10. If anything unexpected happens, do not abandon your brothers. If arrested, shoulder all responsibility and blame. Do not involve your brothers. And so that's their code of ethics. Tong activities. Again, most of their activities are very prevalent in Chinese American communities, Chinatowns. And the Chinatowns exist outside of, and we know San Francisco's Chinatown is the most famous one, but keep in mind, every major city's got one. I mean, we were talking in class when I lectured about this. Several students in class talked about, being familiar with the Chinatown in Houston or the one in Dallas. And each one of these Chinatowns, these big cities, will have a Tong in it. And we'll have numerous Tong and probably, more than one or two fighting Tong or criminal organization Tong. For the Tong, their activities largely around opium smuggling and other types of narcotic trafficking. In addition to drugs, they're into extortion, bribery, prostitution, gambling, typical organized crime type activities. But their strict membership limitations makes it hard for law enforcement to really get a handle on that. And unlike the Yakuza, so here's a hint for you unlike the Yakuza, the Tong and the Triad are very secretive, whereas the Yakuza are very much in the public eye. Their members are very different. And while I mentioned that Yakuza guys are very easy to pick out. I mean, black suit, sunglasses, missing finger, tattoos all over. Yakuza. The Tong, no tattoos. They're very much, if you see pictures and depictions of Tong and Triad leaders, they could blend into Chinese society very easily. They don't have any of the markings that would make them stand out. The Tong do ally themselves quite often with other ethnic Chinese gangs that might not be Tong. In fact, they tend to use non-Tong Chinese gangs for security work, for expendable labor for criminal enterprises. They tend not to control those groups, but again, they tend to use those for special activities. And then for violence of the Tong, again, the Tong Triad, they're not as violent as other groups, but when they do engage in violence, it is to the extreme. They have a group. Tongs tend to have a group called the Hatchet Men, where axes and hatchets are the preferred weapon, and so someone that has been killed by the Tong, it's done in a very easily recognizable way. Okay, that's it for Tong Triad. I told you it wouldn't be very long for Triad and Tong. So a short video for video 2. We'll do video 3 on Russian organized crime. Probably follow the same pattern. So the Russian OC, see, look at my notes. I'm thinking the Russian OC video may be a little longer than this. And then a video about the Kurdish Workers' Party. And then so we'll have 4 videos this week on different topics. So this ends the Tong Triad video.